Welcome to a new Tea to Grace podcast, and welcome back to the deep dive.
Hey there.
We're jumping straight into something that actually came from you, the listener. Someone shared this really dense source with us.
Yeah, quite the read. It's
Yeah.
a transcript, right?
Exactly. And it lays out some, well, pretty provocative claims. Stuff about historical roots, present-day influence, groups called the Black Aristocracy.
Mm-hmm. And alleged links to organizations like the Jesuits. It covers a lot of ground.
It really does. Spanning millennia, connecting ancient families to modern global stuff.
So our mission today really is to navigate this source, as it's presented. We're extracting the core claims, trying to trace the narrative, understand the perspective it's putting out there.
And we need to say this up front. This stuff touches on sensitive topics.
Oh, yeah.
History, religion, ethnicity. It's all in there.
Definitely. So our approach is just to impartially lay out what the source says. We're focusing only on the information in this document.
We're explaining the claims, how the source connects the dots, not saying this is true or this isn't.
Think of us as mapping it out for you, showing you the arguments, the structure of this specific narrative.
Yeah, and it's quite a narrative. It pulls in ancient history, genetics, these powerful families, empires, religious orders, even pop culture symbols.
It promises some surprising connections, that's for sure.
It's definitely a unique take.
No doubt.
Okay, let's unpack this. So this term, Black Aristocracy, the source uses it right away. What's the core idea? It's not just about nobility, is it?
No, the source is very clear on that. When it says aristocracy, it's not talking titles or traditional European nobility.
So what is it about then?
It's explicitly linked, in the source's own words, to specific genetics. A particular bloodline is supposedly the defining thing.
Ah, okay, a bloodline thing. And the source traces it back.
Right.
Where? Siberia.
Exactly. The claim is origins in the Ural-Siberia region, ancient nomadic groups.
And from there, they supposedly spread out.
That's the narrative. They allegedly moved into Mesopotamia, Egypt, Jerusalem, Anatolia, Greece. Eventually Europe, the U.S., gaining influence, sometimes control.
So it's not just one period. It's presented as this, long-term infiltration across history.
Precisely. The source argues that a core group of these families persisted. They adapted, took over existing power structures, or sort of fused with them.
Oh.
Yeah, it claims their activity goes back maybe 2,000 years, linking them to groups like the Babylonian Brotherhood. It's presented as this continuous line.
But even within this group, the source mentions conflicts. They weren't always on the same page.
Right. That's a detail the source brings up. It draws parallels to historical factions, like the Guelphs and Ghibellines in Italy, groups fighting for power within the system.
And the source says that divisions still exist today.
Yeah, it claims there are still divisions, like black and gray factions. Maybe not open war, but different approaches to the same goal.
With the black faction being more extreme.
That seems to be the implication. And the source definitely claims there's been an acceleration of their globalist agenda in the last 50 years or so.
An agenda framed as, what, millenary conquest?
That's the claim, yeah. A goal stretching back thousands of years, aiming for global control. That's the ambition the source assigns to them.
Quite the long game. Now, the source zeroes in on a specific historical moment. Rome, right? A turning point.
Yes, it focuses heavily on the Jewish wars against the Roman Empire, particularly the siege of Jerusalem with General Titus.
And the source claims he cornered the elite families there, the high priests.
That's the narrative, the 24 families of high priests. But instead of wiping them out,
A deal was made.
according to the source, yes, an agreement with Titus, who speculates maybe their wealth, temple treasures perhaps, was exchanged for their lives and safe passage.
And they ended up in Rome, the heart of the empire they just fought.
That's the claim. Brought to Rome not as slaves, but as free people, given villas, resources, allowed to integrate.
And from there, the source says they started their real work.
Exactly. The claim is they slowly embedded themselves. Started as merchants, took Roman names. The source mentions Josephus Flavius, the historian, as potentially linked to this.
And eventually they replaced the old Roman elite.
That's the assertion. Took control from within, replacing the old senatorial class.
And their main tool wasn't just money or force, but cult.
That's central to the source's argument for this period. They allegedly engineered and used specific cults for control, recruitment, infiltration.
The cult of Mithras being the prime example.
Right. The source calls Mithraism a Saturnine cult, links it to Judaism, and describes it as the very first Freemasonry.
A secret society to control powerful Romans.
Allegedly, yes. Recruiting officials, military leaders, administrators. creating an inner circle.
And this connects to the Ordo Equestris, the knights.
The source makes that direct link. The equestrian order controlled military power, so Mithraism through them becomes key. And this is seen as the model for later chivalric orders.
Like the Templars.
Yeah, the source draws a line from the Ordo Equestris to the Templars, Hospitallers, alleging this continuous influence connected to these families, maybe even within parts of the church.
So the source basically frames this whole Roman episode as revenge.
It explicitly calls it the Great Revenge of the Jews, not military, but subversion, taking over the empire from the inside. That's the source's interpretation.
Wow, okay. That's a very specific take. Let's shift to the genetics part. You mentioned the source really emphasizes bloodlines.
Yes, it's fundamental to how the source defines this aristocracy. It even breaks down the word itself.
How so?
It links aristocracy to the Sanskrit ariji, meaning lord, and connects that to the Iranian nomadic groups it claims were the originators, back in Ural, Siberia.
The same groups associated with horses and chariots.
Exactly. The source connects those dots. Horses, chariots. Linking forward to the Ordo Equestris in Rome, and even back to the Hyksos in Egypt, described as Asiatic invaders with chariots, too.
And this is where the idea of an elect race or Aryan comes from, according to the source.
Yes. The source claims this ancient concept started with these families wanting to keep their bloodline pure, not mixing with others.
And is there a specific genetic marker the source points to?
It mentions the Rutinism gene, associates it with reddish or blonde hair, blue eyes, presented as a kind of physical signature.
Does it give examples?
It does. Historically, it mentions the mummy of Ramesses II, claiming it was Caucasian with his profile, and then it jumps to modern figures.
Oh, like who?
Well, the source specifically calls out Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg.
Really? Why them?
It points to their appearance, blue eyes, Zuckerberg's reddish hair, combined with their power and wealth. It presents these as smoking guns, evidence of this genetic line's continued influence.
So it's not just appearance, it connects them to networks.
Yeah, the source claims Gates wasn't just some garage startup guy, but came from generations of operatives for these families, linked to the Rockefellers and U.S. Illuminati networks.
Zuckerberg's rise is also framed as connected. Okay, this brings us to probably the most controversial claim the source makes. The link between this elect race idea and the Holocaust. How does the source explain that?
Right, this is extremely sensitive, and we have to be crystal clear we are only reporting what the source alleges.
Understood.
The source asserts that the concept of an elect race, originating with this specific elite, which it often links to Ashkenazi Jews, but portrays as distinct from the general Jewish population, was the actual foundation for Nazi ideology.
So, wait. The source is claiming this elite within the Jewish community, not outsiders, were behind the Nazi Aryan race concept.
That is precisely what the source claims. It argues this specific elite is the real enemy of the Jewish people themselves.
Wow.
It cites historical Ashkenazi Sephardi distinctions and mentions Orthodox Jews in Israel who oppose Zionism and state policies, which the source claims discriminate against non-Ashkenazi Jews and Palestinians. It's presented as this internal conflict leading to, in the source's terms, an ethnic cleansing of non-Aryan Jews by this elite using the Nazis. Again, just reporting the claim.
That's a heavy claim. And does the source extend this genetic link idea to U.S. presidents too?
Yes, it asserts that most U.S. presidents, with few exceptions, share this genetic link. It cites research connecting many to the Plantagenet lineage.
Even Obama?
It claims a link through his mother's side, yeah. The source suggests the selection process for presidents often involves these bloodline criteria.
So this whole narrative hinges heavily on genetics-specific bloodlines being key to this group's identity and power right through history.
That's the core argument about their continuity, yes. A shared genetic heritage allegedly tied to power.
Okay, moving to the present day. How does the source say this group operates now? Are they public figures?
Mostly not, according to the source. It claims these core families stay hidden, operating behind the scenes.
Using operatives.
Exactly. Public figures, politicians, celebrities, CEOs are presented as operatives carrying out the agenda, but not the ones truly pulling the strings.
And controlling things like the media.
Definitely. The source alleges mainstream media is largely controlled by them, suppressing information about their existence or activities.
The source also talks a lot about symbols, doesn't it? The pyramid, the eye.
Yes, symbols are presented as a kind of signature, a way to mark territory, or as the source puts it, give energy to their egregore, their collective entity.
And these symbols are everywhere. Media, logos.
That's the claim. And interestingly, the source suggests many people using them, like celebrities maybe, don't even know the ancient meaning. It's just part of the expected imagery of power or being in.
The source also hits hard on multinational corporations.
Right. This is seen as a primary modern tool. The source claims these families are major shareholders, often hidden via nominees, in the biggest global corporations, pharma, tech, finance, etc.
And the corporations aren't just businesses, they're tools for social engineering.
That's how the source describes them. Like modern versions of ancient orders. Powerful tools for social engineering, geopolitical maneuvering, restructuring society globally towards their agenda.
The source also mentioned a second wave in the Middle Ages.
Briefly, yeah. It talks about groups like the Lombards and Alans coming from the east, also linked by the source to Ashkenazi lines and the rise of Italian banking families.
Which reinforces Italy's role in all this.
Exactly. The source puts huge emphasis on Italy, the Italic Peninsula, calling it the Black Art, the central hub for this mondialist agenda for the last 2,000 years. It's seen as the key strategic ground.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Seeing how the source tries to tie all these threads together. Ancient stuff, genetics, Rome, medieval finance, modern corporations.
It paints this picture of continuous evolving influence, adapting the tools from ancient cults and knights to medieval bankers and today's multinationals and media.
And speaking of tools, the Jesuits, the source gives them a big role, right? Especially later on.
Yes, the source sees the Jesuits as a key intelligence network, kind of a successor to earlier models like Mithraism. It describes them as paramilitary, not just religious.
Founded by Ignatius of Loyola, who had a military background.
Right. The source highlights that. Claims Loyola's innovation was embedding intelligence gathering inside the religious structure.
Making it easier to operate secretly.
Exactly. Not wearing distinct habits all the time, becoming confessors, tutors, advisors in powerful circles. The source claims this allowed them to gather intel discreetly for certain families and the Vatican.
The source even suggests Vatican secret services were the basis for modern intelligence agencies.
It makes that assertion, yeah, that the Vatican's info services were a kind of matrix for modern spy networks. Posing the question, why would a religious body need that? It alleges an active struggle inside the Catholic Church, a Jesuit-aligned faction pushing the globalist agenda versus other groups opposing it.
So this whole historical narrative leads right up to now. How does the source describe the current global situation based on all this?
It sees things as moving towards much tighter control. It uses terms like dittatura sanitaria, a sanitary dictatorship, or maybe a model like new communist China, especially in Europe and Italy.
That sounds pretty bleak the way the source puts it. Does it offer any hope? Any sign this agenda might fail?
It's not entirely fatalistic. It does mention signs that this millenary plan might not succeed, claims there is a significant struggle happening.
Where?
Specifically highlights Italy again as a key battleground where there's active resistance against this agenda.
Okay, so that brings us to the practical advice. Given this picture, the source paints control, manipulation. How does it suggest we navigate it? What should you, the listener, do?
What's really fascinating here, given the scale of it all, is how much the source emphasizes individual critical thinking. It's not about giving up.
So step one is, don't be lazy.
Pretty much. Do your own research. The source really warns against just passively accepting information, even from sources you think you agree with.
And evaluate everything critically, mainstream and alternative.
Absolutely everything. The warning is that infiltration and bad info are everywhere, both sides. You have to learn to reason for yourself, compare data, filter it.
The source also touches on how digital media affects this.
Yeah, it notes the flood of quick videos and online stuff might make people less patient for deep reading and critical analysis. Suggests being aware of how screen time affects your focus.
And protecting yourself mentally.
It talks about finding inner balance, cultivating an interior bastard, like a strong, skeptical inner core to shield yourself emotionally from the constant barrage of information.
And the core conflict is about?
A war for the control of energy and mind. That's the ultimate battleground, according to the source.
But finally, even while digging into all this potentially isolating stuff, connect with others.
Yes, that's key advice. Don't isolate yourself. Stay connected with people, even those who see things differently. It helps stay grounded.
So this deep dive, following your source material, has really covered a massive sweep of alleged history. Ancient origins, genetics, Rome, medieval times, institutions like the church, multinationals, right up to today.
Yeah, it presents this narrative of a hidden thread, a specific lineage operating through millennia, adapting its methods.
Connecting Roman wars, the Holocaust, in that very specific, controversial way the source claims, banking, Jesuits, modern corporations, all around this central group and their supposed agenda.
It's one very particular, intricate perspective on history and power.
And the main thing the source seems to want you, the listener, to take away is, despite the scale of the forces described, the real power lies in your ability to think critically.
Do the research, compare perspectives, filter information for yourself. That's the recurring message.
Use this deep dive as a map of one perspective, but the journey of understanding is yours.
Exactly, as the source itself advises.
So, the thought to leave you with, drawing from the source's own conclusion, if this millennia-spanning agenda, as described, actually exists, is it truly inevitable? And what role does your own awareness, your critical filtering, that inner balance actually play in whatever future unfolds?
Keep digging, keep questioning, and remember that core advice from the source. Learn to reason for yourself.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Hopefully it gave you a lot to think about and a clear understanding of the claims within the source you shared.